Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Resilient Woman podcast, a podcast that supports all women on the journey to becoming their most resilient self in life and in business. I'm your host, Kimberly Smith. I hope you all are doing well today. Today is going to be a little bit of a different style episode. I'm recording this on Zoom, and if it ever makes its way onto YouTube, people will see that I am sitting on the floor in what will soon to be my new office. And things are a little crazy right now. Things have been in a little bit of a flux state. I am in a huge life transition. I have been for the past 3 months, and I want to talk about it today. I've been kind of in my own shell, doing my own thing for, I'd say, probably the last 3 to 6 months, if I'm honest. I have been preparing for a lot of these shifts in my life. Maybe subconsciously, I knew they were coming. Some of them I intentionally knew were coming because, as we get into this, they are definitely intentional changes. Life transitions have this way of just throwing us for a loop, really shaking up our worlds and causing us excess stress and anxiety in our lives. I'm no different. I coach people all the time on stress management, on mindset, and I'm a person. I experience these things too. I have to practice everything that I preach every single day, especially in these moments where I feel shaken and ungrounded. So a little life update, what's been happening with me for, I don't know, since January. Let's just start there. If you follow me on social media, you've probably noticed a huge decline in my presence online, showing up on social media, particularly Instagram, because that's my favored method. And, I just kind of, I think that people always see those shifts and they're like, probably thinking like, what's happening? What's going on? What, she's not as present here. Like, or maybe that's all in my head. Who the fuck knows? Right. But, so many people have reached out to say hello, to ask what's going on. I've, shown snippets of my recent move and just asking me how things are going. Right. And so I know y'all are curious, and that's cool. Right. Like, so since January, I would say I'd done a couple different things, right? The first big change and big shift in my life is that I actually took a full-time job working outside of my business. And this was an intentional change. This was an intentional shift. I've spent the last 4.5 years working primarily on my business, doing some consulting work, here and there, back in recruiting, back in, different spaces, helping people get their businesses set up, rework their hiring processes, just hiring people for their businesses, getting them all set up with their team, that type of thing. But primarily it's been my business has been my main source of income, and also just, where I put most of my effort. And that has been amazing. I am so grateful that I've had that time from 2018 to now. And that being said, it has also been super stressful, in a new way, right? Which, obviously so happy that I have the tools that I have, that I'm able to practice as much self-care as I am, and still a lot of stress going on, right? A lot of high highs, a lot of low lows, right? I mean, they're in business when you are running your own business. If you have your own business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, there are, one of the biggest things that scares people, I think, is the finances, right? The financial aspect of not having a secure paycheck. So when I decided to go all in on my business, I was in a very good financial position, and I had some money for my divorce, and I decided to go all in, made some big investments in my own coaching, in my own development, in all the things that I would need to get my new life set up, right? And I don't regret that at all. And as I've grown my business and launched different services and offerings, I've had some really amazing months. And then I've had some months where, weren't so great, right? And, that really teaches you, number one, to manage your energy and your mindset even better. So, looking at that, it's all been practice and an amazing landscape to do that in, right? And so as I was kind of coming up on the end of 2022, in the fall of 2022, I was lucky to launch a coaching cohort called the Business Momentum Mastermind with one of my best friends, Barbara. And it was a huge success. We really just were so proud of what we created. It was amazing to have the women in that group have such big successes. And we were looking forward to running it again. But as life happens, Barbara's life took her in a different direction. It was basically, we knew by the end of 2022 that she was going to be making a move overseas to the Netherlands. So, I feel like I had put so much effort into that side of things, and we had such a big vision, and we still have such a big vision. And a piece of me, like my heart just kind of broke a little bit, being in this space of entrepreneurship can feel very lonely and very isolating, and needing to have such incredible self-discipline to really focus on the things that you need to grow personally and professionally takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time, right? Happy to give it. But then, something like that, I don't know, it just kind of left me feeling like tired. Right. And hearing that news, I'd been maybe just having put in the last 4.5 years into my business. I've been doing a lot in my business, learning the back end. I've done everything from building the website, the finances, the marketing, everything top to bottom. And I realized that I needed a bigger cash injection in my business than I was making. And I had a couple different options there, right? And one of them is taking work outside of my business, which I've always been open to. I always kind of keep my eye on the job boards and kind of looking at things, but recruiting, executive recruiting, staffing, the industry that I was in and have stayed tied to for the last 12 years is very high intensity. It's very go, go, go. There's a lot of the burnout culture and the hustle culture because it's so fast paced, which is one of the reasons why I actually love it. And it was also one of the things that ruined me. Not ruined me, but was part of my downfall, right? Is getting caught up in that hustle, getting caught up in things outside myself. So honestly, a new opportunity came along. I'm not going to go crazy in this because I feel like I have so many things I want to pack into this episode, but a new opportunity came along. I couldn't say no to it. I needed a break from my business and I wanted to put my effort into something fun like this podcast, right? Which is helping myself grow professionally and personally in new ways. And so it was more of a pivot, an intentional pivot to have a bigger cash flow, right? Because I can then invest that money into some passive channels in my business to grow that, which I am in the midst of getting that set up, right? And then just streamline my focus, right? Take away doing all the things and just try and focus on the job and my family. And that's it. I really wanted to simplify because as an entrepreneur, you have a million things running through your mind. And I say entrepreneur, but I think it's more of a neurodiversity thing. I am convinced that my brain is very unique. And I know a lot of you listening probably feel the same way. I have had a lot of multi-passionate clients as well. And that's how I would describe myself, is that I just always have this dialogue running in my brain, and it can be a bit overwhelming. I definitely think it contributes to my level of anxiety, no doubt. Just trying to condense my focus, right? That was my purpose. That was my intention in taking this job, getting some more cash flow, being able to invest in these outside things, and just taking a break from doing it all. right? Or doing less, just doing less. Cause I don't think I was doing it all. I was outsourcing a bit and, always doing a lot of self-care, but feeling like I could be close to burning myself out if I kept pushing. So that's that, took a job. It's going well. I love the people that I'm working with. It's actually reignited my passion for different things. The role itself, I'm, a US business manager for a recruiting and staffing firm, primarily focused on the energy industry. So I have a team and I'm responsible for their development. So I'm still coaching just in a new environment, right? And I'm still working with my private clients too. So that was also the beauty of this position, is that I can still have my business. They know about my business. They know that, I'm always kind of working side deals and things, right? And they're cool with that. That makes me happy, right? That I can have this role and also have space for this passion and what I love, which is coaching people and helping people really find themselves, find their purpose, carve a happier path, become more resilient, all of it. The new job, my friend moving, Barbara, if you're listening, missing you big time. And then also preparing for another huge life transition on top of those two big shifts, which is moving in with my partner. And I don't really talk a lot about my relationship online. I don't really talk a lot about it within my social media account. Like, it's primarily just, business and coaching stuff, personal development. But I really want to share this because it's a huge part of where I've been these last 3 months. And it has brought me back to a place of high anxiety and fear. And this is something that we all experience, right? And it's really forced myself to kind of go back and practice some of these key things to help support myself. And I want to share that with you so that you can do that too. So moving in, cohabitating, whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, y'all know I'm divorced in 2020. Here we are. Actually, it's almost 3 years to the day that I got divorced. So my divorce was final on the Friday. I think it was a Friday, the March 13th, which was like the day the world, like everything kind of shut down, or the day before everything shut down because of the pandemic. And I met Aziz very shortly after. I was very newly divorced, was not looking for a long-term relationship. He was very patient, very supportive. We had kind of a similar path, both divorced, both have daughters around the same age. We met in a very kismet way, in an elevator. I don't know, a lot of you have probably heard this story, but for those of you who haven't, I think it's pretty special. So I'm gonna share it. Basically, we were working in the same building and he opened the door for me one morning. We kind of, chit chatted in the elevator. There was a vibe, a very strong vibe. And then I didn't see him again for a couple months. And one day I was about to leave the building and I was thinking, where did that dude go? He was kind of cute, right? He was kind of good. Then I took the elevator down and the doors opened and he was there and he looked at me and he said, "Where have you been?" And I just said, "Where have you been?" And it was like, "Ooh, yes, give me your number, please." So that's that, that's, all she wrote, but we made it through a pandemic together. And something about that, just, we have something special, right? And that has been hard in a lot of ways. It's been beautiful in a lot of ways, but for probably about the first year of our relationship, I really resisted it mentally and emotionally. Like, I was there and loving it and had this beautiful thing. And somewhere in my heart and my head, it felt like this wasn't real, like this wasn't happening, that I didn't want to get in too deep, although it's already pretty deep into this new relationship. And it was because I was scared, essentially, right? I mean, I left my marriage, wanted to be by myself, wanted to be my own. And here comes this amazing man that I have prayed for, like literally. And Actually, like one morning as I was headed into that same job where I met him, I remember saying, God, please just give me a man who has his shit together. and, and I swear that that prayer was answered. So, you know, we have been working towards this point for a long time, you know, being both divorced. It's triggering for us both to come back into this place where when you leave your marriage, and if anybody's divorced, like you almost feel like you're not betting on that to ever happen again. I don't know. I mean, for myself, so many people asked me as I was getting a divorce, before things were even final, before the ink was dry on my divorce papers, do you ever want to get married again? Now, to me, that was like a silly question because how the fuck would I know? Right? Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to focus on myself and do what I can to keep myself sane and get used to being, you know, independent, like, and just with Kimberly, getting to know myself in this phase of my life. My answer to that question was always like, probably not. Like, I am loving where I'm at, which I really did. I was loving my solitude, loving having my own place for the first time ever in my entire life, decorating the way I wanted to decorate, not having to worry about anybody else. It was a beautiful thing, right? Obviously worrying about my daughter, but like, you know, in a normal mom way. I just didn't bet on that being in my cards, right? I had to really let go of a lot of things with that divorce in the sense of I didn't know whether I was ever going to get married again. I didn't know whether or not I would have any more children, which was something I grieved immensely before actually making that decision to get divorced. I knew that I needed to be okay with just having one child, because to make decisions in my life based on wanting to just be married and wanting to have more kids, to me, that didn't seem like that was the best reason to make those decisions. Like, you have to make decisions based on whether or not it feels right, right? Like, I think a lot of people do enter into marriage because they think, and honestly, I was probably guilty of this. This is the next step in our relationship. This is the next step in life, is to have a baby. Well, do you really want to have a baby? Do you really even want to fucking get married, right? Like, these are the societal expectations that we don't realize, right? If you really want to do those things, great. But living a conscious life and being intentional about things means that you actually think about it and you ask those questions and you think about the alternative too. Like, what's the alternative? How does that feel? Can I picture myself there? What does being married even mean? What does that mean for my lifestyle, for the way that I make decisions, for the way that I just live every day? I think that marriage is a beautiful thing. Partnership is even better because, you know, you really get to design that, right? I think I got sucked into the whole traditional view of marriage and the, you know, gender roles, and, you know, that necessarily didn't work for me. You know, I was looking for something a little bit more egalitarian, a little bit more equal, but finally accepting that, yes, getting to a place where I was like, I do actually want to be in a partnership again. I would live with somebody again was a really big deal. And here we are. Here we are, you know. I moved into his place. You know, he bought a house in a couple of years ago, kind of after the pandemic. This is a big decision for a lot of reasons, obviously, not just for myself, but for my daughter, right? Like, I come with a +1 and he does too. So it actually has been really wonderful because our daughters are of the same age. They're in the same grade. They love each other like crazy. It's just one big party when they're together, right? So we're very blessed in that sense. Since we've moved in together, things have been really great. Like, it doesn't feel like anything has changed. I mean, we obviously always saw each other, you know, spend almost every night together prior to us living together. But now it's all about creating a home and a space that feels really authentic for us both. I mean, I moved into technically his house. So how do I like put my little stamp on it, right? Still trying to figure that out. There's a lot of positives in this, a ton of positives. And we see those. And much like anything in life, things are layered, things are multidimensional. So, you know, people reaching out, asking me like, how's the move? How are things going? Like, you know, there's only so much that you can explain in a DM, in a text message, in a phone call. And to be honest, I don't think I really knew how I have been feeling. I have not really had as much time to dedicate to myself and to my own practices amidst this move. That has, obviously played a role in my heightened stress and my anxiety and my mindset. And still things have been pretty good. And I'm kind of amazed by that because, but I have felt that I'm feeling off. I'm not feeling quite myself. I'm happy about all of these things. So grateful for all of these things. And yet I just don't feel quite like me, which is scary, right? Because that connection to myself has been such a huge part of my life and my transformation and becoming more conscious and awake to how I'm living every single day and the decisions that I'm making and just everything. So things are great. And there's been a lot of fear, a lot of feeling triggered, a lot of just kind of being zoned out, which is a symptom of stress and anxiety, is just kind of like zoning out. It's so easy to just go through the motions of life because there's just so many things to do, right? Even more so during a move. So I've been caught up in fucking unpacking boxes and organizing and like all of this external stuff that needs to be done. It obviously needs to be done. It's obviously contributing to me feeling more settled and more grounded and more like myself. And that's for sure. Every time I get a little corner set up or like a drawer organized, like I feel almost like this sigh of relief. And it's silly, but for sure, there's some therapy in it. But I haven't really sat down to do much journaling, which is, for those of you who know me personally, like it's one of my favorite methods to really reflect and to find some stillness, is to brain dump and write it all out. So the other day, I wrote down a list of some of my random thoughts, and I want to share those with you. So some of the things that have been going through my mind when I think about this move, when I think about where I currently am, there's been this feeling of guilt, actually. Guilt for the fact that I have, stepped away from my business in such a big way, or not stepped away, but just scaled back, even though I know that it's temporary and I'm still putting a lot of effort like into this podcast and into my clients and all of that, right? I feel this immense amount of guilt. I haven't felt inspired to show up on social media or to create content, or other than this podcast, I feel as if I'm falling behind on my dreams and my goals, to be honest. And that's a hard one, right? To feel like that. There's a part of me that feels like I've sold out a little bit, right? Sold out a little bit for not particularly money, but for security, in the sense of like taking this job. But I know that that's not true, right? Like, and we're going to get to the mindset shifts for sure, right? Because this exercise of writing down all your random thoughts, the flip side of that is to reframe it. Reframe that shit so you can get your mind right. Some of the other things kind of going through my mind, guilt about spending some of this money that I'm making, and actually taking on more clients too, because I took more like resume jobs, and like I had a bunch of random people like reach out to me for different services and offerings in January and February, and even now, having more cash flow. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to invest some of this money back into my business, obviously, and I also want some other stuff, getting settled in this house, needing to kind of like get it styled up. I mean, Aziz, he's like any man. He don't have an eye for interior design necessarily. So he's got many other talents, but interior design, not so much. I've just felt generally ungrounded. I've felt like I'm actually craving validation from Aziz, because I think I got a lot of that validation and just affirmation from my business, from doing all those things. And that part has, kind of gone into a different mode. So I feel like I'm seeking that in a different way from him. I am scared too, to get lost in some of my other work in this recruiting job, to lose touch with what I know is important. And I feel that, right? And I'm scared to get caught up in the monotony of daily life. I'm craving consistency in a way, like craving this consistency of getting back to like a daily routine and a schedule and all that. But then I'm also at the same time resisting it, which is so fucking weird, and this is like the conflicts that we typically see in our life as well, is like shit just does not fucking make sense. Like we say we want something, but then we're resisting it. We're doing the absolute opposite. Yes. So I'm also feeling like I need a fucking vacation. How are things going? If anybody asks me, I'm going to be like, I feel like I need a fucking vacation straight up. At the same time, I'm like, is now the right time to take a vacation? Like, I don't know, more than anything, like I look at this list of like random thoughts, and the immediate thought that comes to mind is that it's all fucking lies, right? Like I should not feel guilty for taking a fucking break. I should not feel guilty for needing rest or wanting to put effort into this beautiful transition of living with the man that I love. Why? Why the fuck do I feel that way, right? Like I should not feel guilty for spending money that I work fucking hard for. I should not feel guilty for putting my effort and my talents into a different business, which, benefits other people and creates this whole other amazing effect, right? This ripple effect out with the impact that's made on those people, with the jobs that are given to these candidates. Well, the candidates that are placed in the jobs that we're filling, how that benefits the companies, everything, right? Like it all matters. So, looking at these thoughts, like the mindset shift is reframing it all, like, is that really true? Fuck no, it's not true. Like I know myself. I know where I'm going. I know that this pivot and this transition are important. And that's just fear. Fear is an illusion. It totally is. So there's those random thoughts. And then there's, on a different side, some even bigger fears that kind of have come up with this transition. And so I asked myself while I was doing some journaling the other day, what am I afraid of now as I've made this transition, right? Because like, I think that there was a fear leading up to this transition, and like we got through it, and it was definitely like great. And then now there's kind of the post. All right, now we're here, right? Now we're here. What do we do with the pieces? Still feeling afraid of, gosh, now we gotta like put the work in, right? Because relationships take work. It's just not going to be like sunshine and rainbows from here on out, right? It's like, I think sometimes we think that once we get married, once we have a baby, once we do whatever, that like things are just going to be like a fucking walk in the park. And like, honestly, things get more complex. Like if anything, it needs more of our time and attention. So what am I afraid of? These are some raw reflections here. And what came up for me while I was doing this was, I'm afraid that it won't last, that it will all fall apart, that I'll be left heartbroken with nothing, moving out of another man's house, right? Because I moved out of the house that I shared with my husband intentionally on purpose. That was my choice. I could have stayed there and I didn't want to, but still like, the visual is like, well, I moved out of that house, and like, is this going to become a pattern? Then, there's this other fear that it will be my fault if something doesn't work out, that I'll be responsible for the hurt and the pain for Aziz, for Amelia, that it will leave damage on other people. There's this fear that like, I'll be the person responsible for that. I don't know why, but then there's this feeling like, I've traded a bit of my freedom. There's the fear of unhappiness and depression sneaking in. There were some dark days before I decided to get a divorce, in the years leading up to all of that in my marriage. There were days where I just honestly couldn't get out of bed. It was really difficult, to say the least, but that's not a place that I want to go again. But I know that it just feels like it's kind of lurking in the shadows sometimes. I have this fear too of like, not being loved. Right. And like, why? Right. Like fear, like I'm here with the man that I love, everything's going great. So why would I feel that way? Getting sucked into materialism, false constructs, losing touch with reality and abandoning myself. That's another big fucking fear, because I think that when I was younger, I was caught up in those things. I was caught up in the expectations of society and, not necessarily materialism, but just like, gotta get, a house and like, things, there's certain things, and those things bring joy and they also are a responsibility. Right. So I think that I've been able to see higher awareness has brought me to see like just kind of comparison of like making that choice a little bit more intentionally, a little bit more consciously. And when we're so caught up in all the things in the external, a lot of times we just don't take time to make those conscious choices. And, I'm such a giver and I care so much about other people that a lot of times I just try to do as much as I can. And what has happened in the past is that I then put myself on the sidelines, and that didn't lead to a great place. That wasn't to my benefit. So like looking at all of these fears, I mean, first, obviously the random thoughts, the fears, it's all an illusion. Like this is all like a story that I'm fucking making up in my head and none of it is real. And that is the thing about like putting this on paper is that you kind of look at it and you reflect and you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is what's happening in my head. First off, it's therapeutic to just physically get it out. But you can really look at how kind of absurd some of these things are because none of it's true. None of it's happened. I'm a completely different person than I was, in my 20s when I was entering into a relationship and starting my marriage. So the flip side of this question too, is that, what are all of these things, these fears teaching me about myself, my life, my beliefs, right? And the answer to that, I wrote down some things, is that I'm a work in progress. I am diving into a new layer of life and love. And so it would only make sense that I would, and that I will continue to meet and encounter moments of self-doubt. This is a textbook example. Everything that I've talked about is a textbook example of how our nervous system works, right? How our brain can work against us. We are so freaking creative, right? In the sense of like just drumming up these doomsday scripts. So that's self-doubt. It's fear. It's trying to protect me in a way, like I can have compassion for that. Like, oh, you're so sweet, trying to keep me from hurt and disappointment and all those things that maybe are unpleasant. And yet I know that it's impossible, right? That, I don't even want to think about those things. I want to live in the present moment of waking up to the man that I love in a house with both of our children, getting to plan a vacation for us both, getting to build a life together more intentionally, seeing each other every day, just being with each other in a new way. Self-doubt and fear are the warning signs, right? Meant to bring you back to your values, to your desires, to actually check yourself into, am I making the choices that are intentional, right? Am I doing what's good for me and in turn good for everybody else, right? Because I think that's, obviously the foundation of self-care. And like living an aligned life is knowing in your heart of hearts that if you trust yourself and you are living life by your values and desires and, with faith and all that, is that the things that are good for you are going to be good for the people around you. That's for sure. Right. The things that I do for myself are best for my daughter. And I trust myself with that 100%. And so they help you kind of course correct and stay in alignment and avoid the downfalls that the fear is reminding you is there, that is possible, that it's definitely a possible threat to your dreams, but only if you give it power. This is could be a whole nother podcast on like manifestation and like manifesting the wrong thing, right? Like you may have heard, like you don't want to give energy or time to the wrong things. And what we think about, our thoughts, is such a huge part of that. It really, really is. The other thing that I wrote down that this is teaching me, that this fear is teaching me about myself, my life, my beliefs, is that there's always more to learn and love about myself. I'm amazed, right? That even after all of the work that I've done and continue to do, there's still moments where I feel fucking shaken, and when you're moving or in any type of transition, new job, new relationship, new home, right? I mean, honestly, it could be anything too. You could go on vacation, you could go away for a weekend and come back and feel shook, right? Because shit's out of order. Like, the house is a mess. You've got a pile of laundry to do, like all the things. Like, so there's always more to learn and love about yourself. And all of these insecurities and these false beliefs that come up, they run deep. They are stubborn as fuck. They are so fucking stubborn. You really have to flip the script. You have to come back to some of these practices of facing fear, feeling fear. And once you face it and once you feel it, that is the way that you heal it. 100%. Right. So a little trick too. And if you haven't done this, I actually I've talked about it with clients. To be honest, I never really did it until the other day. I talk to my fear quite often. That is for sure. I have definitely like consciously talked aloud to my fear and told it to like pipe the fuck down. Right. And this was a new one for me, is really just to give it a face, a name and a face. So I have a client actually who nicknames hers Regina. I may have talked about this before, but I just thought it was like the best thing in the world. So Regina from Mean Girls, brilliant. And I asked myself, what does mine look like? Well, mine looks like Ursula, the sea witch. She steals people's souls, their spirit, their light. She tricks them. She makes like nefarious one-sided deals. She's sneaky. She's fucking twisted. Like that's my fear. And it's not so scary. All right. Like to realize that this fear is trying to protect you, but you can be bigger than that. Right. Taking time out for yourself to think about like how you are feeling when you feel like maybe you are a little bit on autopilot, where you've just kind of been doing the things, but you're kind of in this fog. Like that mental brain fog is a symptom of stress and anxiety. And it's not like one that we normally think about. Anxiety, a lot of times we think about those outward symptoms of like sweaty palms and shortness of breath. But there is a whole laundry list. And we'll get into that on a different episode for sure. But I hope this helps somebody. If you're feeling fear in your life right now, write down all your random thoughts, brain dump that shit, right? Give your fear a name and a face. Write down what you're afraid of, right? And then and flip that all around, right? Ask yourself if that's really true, which it's not, because it's always fucking lies. And then ask yourself, what are these things teaching you about yourself, about your life, about your beliefs? And start there. I promise you 100%. I felt better after. And I'm going to continue to dive into this and, explore how I'm feeling. But that's kind of where I'm at. I have made some intentional choices for myself, for my family, for my life, for my business. And there's a bit of impatience there as well, right? We always want to force our way through a transition, which is impossible. So pace yourself, take it slow, give yourself permission to do less, to just focus on a couple things instead of the huge to-do lists, right? Like that's not going anywhere. Little by little, the bird builds her nest, right? That's the key. That's the key to resilience, is just not giving up. I think, it doesn't matter how fast you go or, really what path you take, because to be honest, there's a million wonderful paths out there that can lead to the things that you desire. It's just about doing that next best thing and taking the pressure off. So, and sometimes that feels like pressure itself, to be honest, right? So stay present, stay conscious, stay aware, have the conversations with yourself, with your partner, with the people in your life. This is all temporary, right? We're space and time. It's all temporary. It's all leading to something else. And that's one of the best miracles of life, is that it's an adventure. We don't get all the details up front, or else shit would be boring as hell. But yeah, I think that's all I got. I'm so grateful for everybody who's tuning in, who's sharing this podcast, who's showing their support and just sending their kind words. And that honestly makes my day. I don't know when I'll start to show up more on social media. So this is the best place to catch me, right? Is here on the podcast. And, this is a stretch for me too. I have to not force myself to do it, but it's teaching me to take the pressure off myself and perfection, right? Normally I would totally have this episode mapped out and outlined and in a Google Doc. Because God knows I love a fucking Google Doc so much. And honestly, I took some notes the other day. I've been thinking about it and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to set up my computer on the floor and see what happens. So I'm grateful that you're here. If you liked this episode, please screenshot and share it to social media. Tag me at kimberly.brook.smith so that I can say thank you. It's such a huge help. It helps me get the word out, reach new people, reach new women, right? Who need to hear these things, who need to hear this message. And just know that I'm really grateful for you. And I'm working on some new content. If you have ideas, if there's something that you want me to talk about or learn about, definitely shoot me a DM and let me know. But otherwise, I will see you next time, and I hope you have a beautiful week ahead.